Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Carissa from People I've Loved. Today, I don't know if your heart feels heavy. I don't mean to assume that it might feel heavy and that you might need some tools to process or to kind of maybe manage the sort of feelings inside your mind and your body. And I have a wonderful, amazing, super inspiring guest today who I'm going to try to get on here. Elle is coming. She is an amazing breathwork coach. Oh my gosh, you're here. Fabulous.
Hello.
Thank you so much for doing this with me today, Alex.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for having me. I just made some coffee. I have some homemade sea salt caramel just for some sweetness for the day.
Oh my gosh, we need sweetness.
We need some sweetness, right? Man.
Can you tell us, just to start out, so this is going to be like, just to create a container for this, we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about you, kind of, if you could give us a brief introduction to who you are and what your practice looks like. And then I really appreciate you offering up the idea of some tools for how to process being in this moment, and maybe like a brief breathwork exercise. If you could talk a little bit about breathwork and the importance of it and why it's interesting, because I actually know surprisingly little about it, but I'm very fascinated.
Yeah, so my name's Elle. I'm an author. I'm a mother of three. I'm a wife, certified breathwork coach, and
A poet.
it's so funny. I haven't written poetry in so long, but I guess a poet at heart. And I also am a journaling teacher, writing teacher. So I teach people how to process their feelings on the pages of their journal without shame and guilt. And so a big part of my work is not just writing books, but choosing to share my story in a way that gives other people permission to share theirs. And so that's who I am in a nutshell. That's what I do. And to be honest, like, I know that we DM'd and I was asking, did you even have the capacity to talk today? I wasn't sure if I did. But I feel like we need moments of vulnerability and community and not knowing and being angry and being sad and holding that together. And so I don't know if I have the words on how to process. I don't know. I'm processing, and I don't know. I just am open to just having a free flow conversation with you about how art heals us, how writing heals us, and how we can give our community tools to process whatever they feel like they need to process in their own time and space.
I really appreciate that, the idea that we need to talk through it and that we need to keep going and that we need to be together even despite I think you had written our big emotions, and as if I would be afraid of your big emotions. um, no, I welcome them. In your, so maybe could we start out, since this is going to be really brief, and I think could we start out with maybe talking a little bit about, you write a newsletter on with the theme of gratitude, and I think gratitude is potentially a healing sort of practice at this moment.
Yeah, so I have a newsletter called Gratitude Weekly, and it's a space where I reflect on the micro moments of joy in my life.
I understand it's a weird starting place considering where we're at, but
No. It's fine. It's fine. I think that's a good point, because what brought me to gratitude was actually my anxiety and OCD, and I had an anxious anxiety attack, and I didn't have anything to grasp on but thank you, body, for getting me out of bed, and that's really where my gratitude practice was birthed, out of grief, deep grief. And you know, having to hold it together while also feeling like I was falling apart. And so I'm glad you brought up the gratitude newsletter, because I tell people it's an invitation to meet yourself where you are.
I love
You
that.
know, I think there's a lot of toxic positivity and spiritual bypassing and all this stuff that happens in the world where we're, you know, conditioned or expected to hold our shit together when shit's falling apart, or just be strong when we are tired of being strong. You know what I mean? And so for me, gratitude has been the permission to be in my grief and also be in my life, or try to be in my life in the best way that I can. Um, and it's just those little moments, like the belly laughs of my kids, or going for my daily walks, or, you know, the random snuggles I'll get from a kid, or, you know, just like the things that we often kind of brush by, or that, I don't want to speak for everybody, but the things that sometimes I just wasn't present to, and I wasn't paying attention to, brought me back to, oh my gosh, like I am alive. And in this moment, my child is reaching for my hand. I am alive, and I can go on my walks and listen. I'm able-bodied enough to go on my walks, and I can hear the birds. Like, and I know it sounds so cheesy and so cliche, but it's in those cheesy, cliche moments that just welcomes us together.
No, I think that that's a really, it very much echoes my like almost every psychiatry session I had during the pandemic, of like, what is the point of everything?
Yeah.
And she would continuously go on about uh, finding joy in the small moments, and how do you figure out how to do that, and like actively seeking
Yeah.
those moments when feeling in like complete despair and out of control.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about kind of spirituality, and I feel like in some ways, could you define what you mean by like a spiritual practice and you as a spiritual being?
Oh, that's a good question.
Again, sorry, you also don't, you can say pass.
No, no, it's fine. It's fine. For me, I think uh, spirituality for me feels like a connectedness to something greater than me. And I grew up in the church. I'm no longer religious. I don't think I ever was religious. I was kind of forced into religion. But when I realized that I could connect to spirit, to God, to universe, to all of the above in a way that felt safe and sacred and comfortable for me, and that didn't happen until my early 20s, I would say. So just knowing, trusting, I don't think knowing, because we don't know anything, but I think like trusting that there is something greater than me leading me, especially because of all the things I've walked through. It's like, that had to have been my grandmother's prayers. That had to have been some type of spirit covering me, because I have been through some things that have just.
Can you tell us a little bit about sort of like how you got to this point of where you're at, in the sense that like you had kind of a traumatic upbringing, and you talk about how you don't want trauma to define you, and
Right.
that you're ready for healing, you're inviting healing, and can you kind of talk about that sort of transition thought path?
Oh yeah. I need tissue. Give me 1 second.
Everyone, if you have any questions for um, Alex, throw them in. Sorry, I turned off the chat. I just couldn't handle
It was a
chat
lot.
time.
There was a lot. So I often say that trauma is not our resting place, or it's not my resting place. And
It's
I,
beautiful put that way.
yeah, yeah, because for so long I kind of felt like that's just like where I belonged, you know? Um, And I'm sorry. And it's not. And I think the work that I do as a teacher and a writer is to just make sure that people know that they have a choice, even when it feels like the world is falling apart, you
Yes,
know?
it definitely does.
Right, right. And it's hard. Like it's hard to like it's hard to try to make sense of life when things are so big and so heavy and so drastic. It's hard to hold on, right? And it's like, okay, how do we acknowledge our pain without resting in it? You know,
That's a definitely really difficult balance.
so so hard, so hard. Um, and I think for me, when I decided that I wasn't just going to lay in my trauma, it doesn't mean I ignore it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What it means is, yes, some really crappy things happened to me in my life, and I'm hurt about them, and I don't have to pretend that I'm not, but I'm also going to give myself permission to take the baby steps forward, right? And like understanding and trusting that baby steps are still steps, even though it's like, damn, like I still feel like I'm in the same spot. Um, but I
It's
think that just allowing ourselves to be human, you know?
it's really hard to like change your expectations, to celebrate those baby steps and to acknowledge them as steps and not just um and not just hold yourself to these like crazy unattainable goals. Um,
Right.
Alex, would you be willing to lead us in a brief breath work? Or how do you approach that when you're working with people? And can you tell us just really briefly what breathwork is? Sorry to transition so fast.
No, it's okay. Breath work is so I got certified in breath work again when I was having a really challenging time last year. This past few years is just like whew, like it's just been a lot. And so I've been searching for tools on how to get back into my body because I tend to dissociate, and that is not healthy or helpful for me. And so I realized before I got certified that I was holding my breath. Like I'm alive, yes, but I was literally holding my breath. And as somebody who has OCD, anxiety, and depression, I've struggled with anxiety and depression since I was a teen, and then recently in my 30s get diagnosed with OCD. And I'm like, oh, like this all makes sense. How do I hold myself through this, right? Um, and so breath work has been the invitation to drop back into my body and to not hold my breath, to be intentionally breathing. That is what breath work is for me. Intentionally breathing and giving myself a moment of pause. Like yesterday when all the news happened, I didn't find out until the very tail end of the day, which was not a great way to end my night, but my husband and I were not plugged into the news. And so when we found out, I just started holding my breath, like as a mother and as just someone who's been carrying so much, especially when it comes to the news that's been happening back to back to back. It's like I just was disconnected. And I said, okay, Alex, you can cry, you can be emotional, give yourself permission to do that, and also give yourself permission to breathe. Because what we don't want you to do is have a full on panic attack. And we were out and about um, at our friend's book event, and it was just wild. And so when we got in the car, I gave myself a moment, and what I practiced was the box breath, which is inhale for 4, hold for 4, and exhale for 4 slowly. and it helps us recalibrate our nervous system. And that's a breath that I come back to often, especially as a person who has anxiety, because it allows me to slowly calm down and recalibrate myself. And so how that works is you just inhale through the nose for 4 slowly. You want to sit up straight. I love this because it can be done walking, it can be done on the train, it can be done in the car, it can be done if you're having a moment, and it just really helps bring you back down to center. So you want to inhale for 4, hold, drop your shoulders, unclench your jaw, soften for 4, and then you just exhale through the nose for 4 slowly. And I tell people to do that 4 to 6 times. And when you feel your shoulders up by your ears, just give yourself permission to drop them and soften. And it's just a practice of paying attention to your holding, paying attention to your releasing, and pay attention to your receiving. So how I teach this in class is that we inhale as a receiving aspect, we hold as a receiving aspect, and then we release as a receiving aspect, as a releasing aspect, of letting go rather. And so it's extremely helpful for me. And I tell folks all the time, before you talk to anybody, especially if it's like high stress, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. If you're having a tough time with your kids, say a tantrum is happening or they're not listening or it's just hard, before you speak, a friend of mine, Jamila Reddy, said, before you speak to anyone, take a breath. So I go to the box breath and I just calm myself down and try to regulate my nervous system until I feel safe enough to show up.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alex, for rallying and sitting with these uncomfortable feelings and for just being with me today. It was a real pleasure to meet you, and thank you also for talking us through the box breath. Everybody, if you don't know, this is Alex Elle. She's an author, she's a breathwork coach, she's a mother. I think she's a poet and will always be a poet. If you go to her Instagram page, she's an amazing public speaker. Her talks will just blow you away. So thank you so much, Alex, and take care. May you be safe.
Thank you, you too. It was so great talking to you, and I hope we get to do this again under, softer moments, but I'm really glad we decided to hold space with each other in this way. So thank you.
Take care, Alex.